Hey, what's up guys? Today in this video, we are going to look at a few more aspects of Adonis JS. So last time we had covered a lot of concepts on routing, right? But one thing which I want to touch upon today is something called as route builder. Okay. It's a way for you to form URLs, and this helps you in many scenarios to have to create URLs within the application. But one of the most important thing which I understand is if we want to create URLs which has query parameters in them, then definitely this is how I would at least use this functionality. So let's see what it is allowing us to do. So we already have the route imported. So let's create a custom URL. So within route, we get something called as builder. Okay. Now inside builder, there are certain functions which we can use to create these kind of URLs. So the first one is QS. So what is QS? QS is basic. I think it will be query string. Yes. So it's a short form for query string, which means whatever parameters we are trying to pass, they will be within the URL. So let's just say we have a situation where there is a data table which can be sorted, which can be filtered, right? So we will have a lot of things which are query parameter based. So here is a URL filter by. Okay, let's say the data table was filtered by name. Okay, there was a drop down. Then right. So what do we have here? I'm saying the query param is filtered by name, sort by ID, sort order descending. And basically what it will translate to is something like a query within our application based on which we will send the result. The idea is that the user wanted to filter by name and then sort the, let's say, the users by ID and descending. So the latest one comes on top. And then on this, if I run the make command, and one thing, as you can see, it also gives me make signed. But let's say if we want to run the make command on it, and in here, I'll just pass like this. Make identifier was not provided. Okay, so what I feel is I need to send a name to the make function, obviously because it needs to understand which URL to generate on. So I will do that. The error goes away, and let's see what do we get now over here. This is view. Let me change that. And now if we go to Firefox, what do we see? We see custom URL expenses question mark, and then the filter by name, sort by ID, and sort order descending. So you can see this is very easy way of creating that query string within your application. You don't need to concatenate and do all kind of logics in here. Few other things which I would like you to understand or keep in mind is right now you see the URL which got generated was /. Now this works when we are working with a backend kind of an application or other stuff. But then if you want for some reason, right, the domain as well, one option is prefix URL. So let's just say HTTPS something like this, right? So if I do this, then it translates to amitavroy.com/expenses to filter by this. So that is the complete URL which I'm getting. Okay. Obviously this doesn't exist. I don't have any URL on my blog which represents that. But yeah, you get the idea, right? And obviously we had make signed. So if we do this, our URL changes with this signature. And so we can use a URL or a route where we can even validate the signature if you want. Obviously, I don't see a reason in here, but in this particular case, so we'll keep it as this. Okay. What next? After the URL builder, there is one more important thing, which is group. Okay. So the group is basically a way for you to obviously, as the name suggests, group certain kinds of URLs. Now, one interesting thing which you can do with groups is obviously, in here we have namespace, but then we can also have something called as prefix. For example, if you want the application to have a prefix of, let's say, exp to all the URLs which are under expenses, I can do that using this prefix. And so every route that I put within this group, they automatically get that prefix, right? Now, this means this URL suddenly will stop working. Why? Because the route has changed. This is the correct route. If you see, even this would have changed because it is within the prefix, correct? So that's one more handy way of using routes, and the prefix definitely helps you in such situations. Obviously, you can add a prefix over here as well, but then you will have to do it manually for all the routes, which I don't think is a good idea. Okay, moving along, we are going to cover something important now, that after the route, there is a very important thing which comes into picture inside the request lifecycle, which is middlewares. But before we dive into the code, I would like you to understand the request lifecycle a bit. Now, those who know it already, I think you can skip, but those who are new, they are learning the request lifecycle, I feel it is very important for us to understand how the request lifecycle works. Okay, so this is the request which a user is making. So let's say this is the browser of a user where he is typing the URL of our API or of our application, right? So when this URL was typed in, this request is made. When this request is made, the framework basically looks through all the routes which we have and checks if, let's say, this route matches. Okay, if nothing matches, it will give you a 404. But let's say if this matches, then what it will do is it will try to understand what we need to do in the route. For example, the framework will try to understand if this is the route, what am I supposed to do? Okay, it will understand I need to call the expense controller.index method. In this kind of a scenario, we are returning the controller's method. So, the controller to URL, when the route hits there, it will understand, okay, I need to execute this, something similar, right? So the routes will do that. But then when we have controllers or when we have closures, a closure is basically this, right? So when the request is being processed within the routes, we can hook into that process, before the process starts. Okay, that's the whole concept, that middleware will come into picture before the request is being processed. Okay, and that's where you can add all kind of business logics into your middlewares, so that if something goes wrong in here, right, if the request is not what you expected, the controller never gets called. No. If the middleware passes, only then the request goes to the controller. If it doesn't, then we don't do anything. And obviously, inside Adonis, we have three kind of controllers. One is global level controllers, named controllers and closures, and we are going to see all three of them. Okay, so let's get started. So first, we will do a middleware which is closure based. How do we do that? So as the name suggests, closure will mean the entire logic of that middleware basically sits in here. So we are saying it is going to be a closure, okay, but it is going to be an async method because the middleware can make database queries and other stuff as well. So this is an async method. We get two parameters in here, the context and next. What is next? Next basically is the function which is executed if the middleware is trying to say, okay, this particular middleware says my job is done. Who is next in this pipeline? That's when we call the next. Basically, if you can think of in a very simple term, if you're calling next function, that means your middleware has passed and you are offloading the request to the either a next controller or to the next middleware or to the controller or even to the closure if your route is something like this. Okay, so let's see. As we know, the closure gets context and next. Now let's just say this middleware is not doing too much. It is just logging the URL where which was being called. So let's just do something like the URL name is context.request URL. I think it's a function, right? Yes, right. So it's a function. So what is now going to happen? This middleware is added to all the routes which are within this group. So if I refresh, go to the terminal, you can see the URL name is this. This is working. Similarly, this is expenses, right? So if I remove 2, you can see this URL is loading and this is also coming. I think this particular URL has some other consoles as well. Yes, and that's why we are seeing them. But yeah, nothing to worry. What we can see is the URL name. Okay, my spelling of name is wrong, but the URL name is this, is printed over here. But for some reason, if we try to do this, okay, this is not within the expense controller. So if I hit refresh a couple of times, you can see there are no logs. Why? Because the namespace, the middleware is applied to the group. I can also add a middleware to a specific route. What that means is now if we do expense/expenses, look at the logs, there is no change. But in here, I can see this is now printed. So basically that means now this middleware is only applied to this particular route. Okay. So this is how a closure based middleware will look. Now, how do we create global level middlewares? Global level middlewares are basically files where you are extracting your middleware data and then you are telling the kernel that these are the middlewares which are present in the application, and global level middlewares are executed on every request, which means a global level middleware will be executed for all these routes. Okay, so let's see how that works. So node, oops, what is this? Okay, this is a Docker thing which I was trying. That's not important. Save node is, let's say, I think it will be make middleware, if I'm not wrong. Make middleware logging. Does this work? Do you mean, okay, my make doesn't have an E, and that's the reason it is failing. Now what is the problem? Is the spelling wrong? Node is, oh yes. Okay, I think the keyboard is misbehaving a bit. I'm not pressing the E with enough force, maybe. Okay, now how was our closure working? So we were getting context, which is the HTTP context contract. So you can see the file which got generated has the similar stuff. It has the HTTP context contract and it has the next function. Okay. And obviously what I can do is I can again console something over here. And because we have HTTP context, I can take the logging object from here and do error and say okay, I'm wasting too much time typing. But yeah, this is what we are saying, that if this is a global level middleware, it should log error this thing. But then do you think this will work? Let's see. This is a console and we got the URL name, but the global middleware had no effect. And obviously it shouldn't, because how will the framework know that a global level middleware was even added? So how do we do that? Come over here inside start kernel.ts, and this is where we register our global level middleware. Okay. Obviously the documentation is also saying the same thing, so nothing confusing. Just you need to follow the guidelines or the documentation, whatever it says. Okay, middleware and then logging G. Okay, and now if I hit refresh, I'm assuming yes, the error is coming. But do note the sequence of it. This is very important. A global middleware is getting executed before the closure middleware is executed, right? And that's the reason the error came first and then the normal console. And this is important. If you want something like, let's say, some kind of a tracking or actually a logging which is on every route. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it is authenticated or not. If some such kind of requests are coming, a global middleware is the way to go. The default body parser middleware is already registered inside global, so that's one thing. But this one, we added it just now. But then let's just say I don't want to add it as a global middleware. I don't want to log, let's say, all the get URLs, but I want to log the specific ones which are expense based. So there are a couple of ways to do it. I feel the best way is named middleware, where, as the name suggests, you create a name and you add this. So now we are saying that we have a middleware called log, and that particular middleware now can be referenced over here. For example, let's just come to this section and middleware log. And now if we refresh, what do we see? The expense tracker is coming, right? Just so that we 100% sure. Let's just do this. And we are getting 1, 2, 3, correct? So which means, again, the named middleware is getting executed before the closure, but then we can control the complete sequence over here as well. For example, now I can, not over here. If I do something like this, the sequence, right? Because it's a named middleware, I can decide. So right now we have the closure first and then the named one, right? So if I now refresh and see the console, you can see the console came in first and then the error came in. So that's how you can control the sequence of middlewares. You can play around with how you want to add the logic. But yes, the global one is obviously going to be the first one. And the last thing inside the middleware, which I told you, right, that if next is getting called, then basically this one will get executed. But if for some reason I don't call this function, okay, there can be two ways to do that. The general practice is you do return. For example, if we find that user, oops, I don't want to actually add the code, so maybe I'll comment it and show you. So let's just say we have authentication in place, and then we see request.user. Okay, if it is present, or rather if it is not present, return. So now what will happen? If this condition is fulfilled, this function never gets called. So the middleware will stop over here, which means the logging will never happen. How do we do this in real life? Let's create a small shortcut. I'm saying return if 1 is equal to 1, which is always going to be true. So hit refresh, white screen. What is happening? Is there some error? No. If we refresh, you will see, where is my XHR? Oops, not this one. It's a page refresh, sorry. I should see the status. Status. Why can't I see the status? That's a bit weird. Status code should be 200. Let's see. Yeah. So status code is 200 and we are getting a blank response. So the middleware came in, it executed this closure based thing. We will see the log, but then after the log, it returned. It never executed next. So this middleware never got called. Let's just say if you put it over here inside the named middleware, which we just created, right? Yeah. If we do something like this, and let's just say we do info, you will understand what I'm saying before the return. So again, hit refresh. Where are we stopping? Let's see. So the name URL came in, the info came in before return, but then finally the log error never showed up. Why? Because this was returned from here. So this never got executed. If I remove this, obviously now I think you understand that we will get all the 3 logs. So yes, this is basically the concept of middleware. A middleware within an application is a very important thing. So do spend some time and understand what middleware does, what are the best situations. Obviously, authentication is one of the most common reasons why we use middleware. But then if you have some background with Laravel, you will know there are many other middlewares which come by default. For example, you have API throttling, you have authentication, you have role-based checks, which can go into a middleware, so on and so forth. So yes, that's middleware for you. I hope you like this video, guys. If you like the video, do click on the thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.